welcome back to Grassy Springs Farms for another day in the shop here. If you've been following along, you'll notice right here for about 6 months has set my 770. It's finally out the door. So I've got all this space opened up. You can still see I've got so much junk piled up in here. But we had three major issues happen this summer. One was the head gasket on the 770. The other was the 1460 disc bind had a bearing or two go out, and I'm waiting on some parts on it. And then the third thing was we lost the gearbox on our 430 John Deere roll baler. And so those were the three major things I wanted to get accomplished this winter, was to get these back in the field for next year. The mower, especially, in the tractor. The baler, I do have a backup baler that I use. So it's not as important, but I want it running because I like this baler better than my backup baler. It bales a lot better, and it does a better job. So we're going to be pulling the gearbox out of this thing today. So let's get started. So what happened to our gearbox is we were rolling some hay. I was checking the gearbox. Everything was good as far as the oil. I rolled about 100 bales one day, and honestly, the next day I went back and started rolling again, and I failed to check the gearbox to make sure it was okay. And I rolled about 96 that afternoon and started smelling a little something. And I got out and obviously looked over here on my doors, didn't see anything smoking. And I raised my lid here where I can see my slip clutch, and then back in here had a lot of chaff build up. It started to flame up a little bit. I had my fire extinguisher in hand. I just popped it a couple times and squeezed it and put that out. But what had happened was the seal, gearbox goes in and it drives this drive right here, which basically drives everything on the roll baler, had gone out, and we'd lost all that oil. And the oil was hot, and it was on that chaff, and the gearbox was getting hot. And once I allowed a little extra oxygen in when I opened this up, that flamed it up. So what we're going to do today is we're going to remove the gearbox. So I'm going to have to pull my drive line here off. I'm probably going to take this shield, take these bolts out of it. Then there's 4 bolts right here. All right, here's our dipstick to check. And then hopefully this gearbox will drop down. And then it's got a coupler that's going to that shaft that runs across here. And I should be able to shift it that way a little bit. So that's the goal today. Let's see what we can get done. All right, we removed these 2 outside bolts. That allowed us to take our guard off. And I think they were a 19 millimeter on this one. Now we're going to put a 20 millimeter. All right, let's get up here. What is made? In there. Really nice, probably a little bit. I don't have the pressure off the belt, so they're not clean. Let's see. Get this in there. All right, both bolts are out. All right, to remove this, to get slide forward, I'm going to take this carrier out. So everything can slide forward. Let's get us a socket. All right, 15 works. So once we got those bolts out, if you've got a 435, it has a 2-piece shaft for the CV joint. You don't have to worry about taking these out. And these are carriage type bolts. So we're going to take these out. And this should allow my shaft to slide out. But I got my fingers too. All right, now should be able to no penetrating oil, no persuasion. All right. Now I looked in the parts manual. There are 3 different types of gearboxes on this thing. I took some pictures with my phone, sticking it down in there, and I feel like I know which one it is. But to make sure it's rebuildable, and all I hurt was the bearings and seals, I need to get it apart. Make sure I didn't crack the housing or anything, because one of the things I did after I sprayed it down with our fire extinguisher was I got back up to the shed up there, and I had to put some water on because I was afraid it was going to catch on fire because it was still a little bit hot and smoking a little bit. So I don't know if I damaged anything or not. That's just one of those. I didn't want to lose a whole baler. Now, there's just 4 bolts holding it. That one I can get to. This one I might be able to get to if I go to a shorter 18, but that other one, that line's going to be right in my way. I think I can get to this one. Well, 3 out of the 4 ain't bad so far. I'm going to have to pull this line right here off to be able to get to that last bolt. All right, we've got the hydraulic line removed. Push it back out of the way here. And the last one wants to be quite stubborn. So, let's go with a little bit bigger. I've got more batteries, they're just on charge right now. So let's see what this one do. All right, gearbox has dropped down. So it should slide this way. I put my camera down here, but I don't think you'd be able to see it. And this collar here has probably been on there, I don't know how many years. So it probably doesn't want to slide real easy. So let's see if we can persuade it a little bit more. Find my pry bar in here. Just move a little bit. Let's see. All right. Well, guys, there she is. It wasn't too bad. Now we need to get her over here on the workbench and get her apart. All right, we got her on the bench, got her all cleaned up. It's a metric through Superior. Definitely looks like we got a bearing out right there, to be expected. So I've cleaned her up a good bit here. with some brake cleaner, and we're going to split the halves on this thing. Two gearboxes I looked at, they didn't split halves like this. They had a cover on them, kind of like a typical gearbox. So they always work out. Just making sure I don't strip something out on this. All right. Let's see. Make sure we got everything out. I believe we do. I have to get my rubber mallet and tap on. See what we can find out here. Really don't want to hit on that housing too much with them. Don't want to chisel on or anything like that. Be gentle here. I don't want to. I don't think there's a gasket between these housings, at least not in the parts manual that I saw, so I want to be cautious because this is aluminum, looks like. I don't know if it would split easier sitting up like this or not. Getting here on the seal housing here. There we go. Oh, we still had some oil in her. Let's wipe all that up. Oh, look at there. Lots of lovely little parts there. So look at this. If our gears all look good, I may just have to put these bearings in. There's 4 bearings, 2 seals. So you got bearing, 2 bearings there. Obviously, the seals at both sides right here. This bearing went completely out. Front end, or the side bearing there for the side drive. Now, try to get this out. Still gonna have to get this coupler off, I believe. All right, there's one shaft. There's a race. This one seems to be the one that's seized in there. All right, they're sitting up here. Let's see if we can. There we go. Ooh-wee. That pretty bearing. Yes, I would say that would make it get hot. Now, that's starting to get a little bit of play in it. I'll spray a little more penetrating oil down in there. Let that set, and then we'll get this thing apart. I know what I've got to have, all my gears that I can see. Doesn't look like any bearing material got into the gears. I'll get that in the parts washer, clean it all up. I'm just not seeing anything. It looks like a tooth chipped or anything right now. So we're gonna order 4 bearings, 2 seals, 4 races. I'll put new races in. And then we'll get her back together as soon as our parts come in. Yeah, I'll get the C-clamp off here, and then I can pull this tube off. And hopefully the gear will come off. Press. This one's got a clip right here. You're gonna pull it off and you're gonna press the shaft out and all your bearings up off of that. So we'll get in our press here, get this clip off, get in our press and get that taken care of. All right, we've got our bearings off our shafts. This shaft here had a little bit of damage and I had to heat it up. I couldn't get this coupler to come off. So this bearing, there's a snap ring right here and the bearing set right there, and that bearing could go either way. I had to remove the ring, slide it down to be able to get to the press to get it pressed off, but everything ended up coming off this end. But I did on this one, I had to cut it before I could get it to slide. It was too mangled up. Looking right here, I cut the edges of it. You can see the bearings on this shaft were pretty mangled up. Here's what's left of them over here. Nothing left. All right, so we're gonna start getting it back together today. Went and got my new bearings, about $178 for all 4 bearings, 4 races, and 2 seals. So not bad considering a used gearbox was about $750, close to me. So this will be a little bit cheaper fix. So we'll get started. All right, let's get started putting this thing back together. Get all my parts laid out over here. Seals. Don't have to worry about the race yet. So our seal, put a little oil on the inside of this. All right, we have our seal on. I want to put our clip in right here, and then our bearing will ride right there above that clip. The seal's on the other side of the clip. All right, so we got our seal on. We're gonna put our clip on, and then our bearing will sit right there as we press it down. So let's get this C-clip on. And I've got a good pair of C-clip pliers at my shop, not here. I'm at the school shop this morning. All right, got our clip on. Now let's start our bearing here. I'm just gonna start it. Then we'll switch over to our press. Now, my press at home, this gear wouldn't fit down between the bars on it, so I had some issues. So I came to work to use the press up here, and we had some problems with our press, with our cylinder here not working. So what I used was a bottle jack as a means of pressing it out. So now I've got to work on this press over here, figure out what's wrong. I think it's in the control over here. Not low on oil, check that. So, but I'm gonna get all set up here, and we're gonna press this bearing on. Okay, so I just got all of the horizontal shaft that goes over to your shaft that drives the baler. And I want to make sure that I got my ring in there. And then I press that bearing down on. Make sure you put your races on. You press this bearing down. And I could see my old marks on it. So I went to there. And then you press this gear on. But make sure that you've got enough room where that gear is so that you can put your clip back on that side. Make sure it'll slide in there. So I had a little extra on it to get that down. Make sure your seal went on first. So when all that gets put back in, you can get it all in there together, and that should have it. Now, I did notice, I'll clean this up, I got a few little spots of wear on these teeth. Nothing bad. I think they'll be fine, but we'll keep an eye on the old baler. It does have a lot of, there's just one or two spots there, and that's probably where that bearing dropped out of there. So we'll get this one installed into the box, and we'll get this other one, all the bearings pressed back on it, and should have everything about ready to go back together. So a small tip on putting this one back together, the one that has the sleeve here. The hardest part I found was getting the key in for this gear. And once you get that in and get that pressed down, and you can see nothing's touching here, you've got a clip right here. See that clip right there? So you're gonna put that clip on, and then you want to press your bearing. It'd probably been smarter if I had pressed the gear up against this right here, and then went back and put my bearing on and pushed it on there. But I've already got this far done. I had it out of line a little bit because I didn't put that on first. So now I'm gonna push all this up, and then your other bearing goes on top up here like that. So it's been a bit of a challenge getting it set up in the presses. I'm back at my shop because I wanted to check a few things in the gearbox housing itself, and you can see how this one lays in there. So I'm just going to clean a few little things up. Got my seal, my races, my bearing. This one didn't have a spacer, but it did have a clip on the end of the bearing here, and there's a clip right in there behind that seal holding that. So hopefully that'll help you when you go to take it apart. A good piece of pipe. Don't use this sleeve here. Use a little bit bigger pipe to press your bearings and things on, and press the gear on over top of that. I found that worked out the best. A lot of it was just trial and error in the press. So I put the bottom part in, and it's a little bit tight to turn. And so I've got a spot in here where the bearing did some damage. I'm gonna pull this shaft here back out and see, because I feel like I've got some more damage in there. But if you want to know how all this comes apart and goes back together, it's a little tough to understand. But your book, if you got a Baler book, this is just an operator's manual. It does kind of talk about how to press everything off. It's not the easiest to understand. You kind of got to keep make sure you know your gear count and all that stuff to keep your shafts separate, because it doesn't have real good pictures of that, but it helps a little bit. So all right, time to get this thing installed. So if you don't know, on these gearboxes, on pretty much all of them, you can actually switch the shafts around, and you can make this baler a 1,000 RPM baler. And the book actually tells you how to do that. I can't remember if you have to buy anything extra with it when you do that, but you can switch these around and make them a 1,000 RPM baler. So I had it laying back there on the table. I didn't have my dipstick or my plug in. I want to put them in just to keep any dirt from getting in it as we install it. I have not filled it full of fluid. I thought it'd be a little easier to hold up and get lined up in here if I didn't have it filled full of fluid. I've got to get it matched up with this shaft on the inside here. So I may actually have it going on. There we go. Believe it or not, I caught it right the first time. Lifted up and lined up. Still need to go in a little bit more. There we go. That helped. All right. Just drop a bolt in there. Out. Better get them better than I did. One in the front, one there. Right there. No, one right. There we go. Now let's go. Remember, on this particular one, this is going into an aluminum housing, so I may have to remove this one. Didn't remove it before, but pull this hose off and make it easier. So I don't want to over torque these. I'll look in the book to see what they torque at right now. I just want to get them pulled up. Make sure that I believe the batteries did. Alright, so I'm going to switch batteries. Alright, so there's no play in there. So that's good. I'm going to make a mess on my shop floor here. I'm going to rake all this extra stuff out of here. Came from underneath that. I'll sweep it out the door here later on. Now, get my slip clutch up here. Oh. Alright. We'll slide it on there. So there's, just like on a regular PTO shaft on a tractor, there's a groove in there. And that's where our bolts go. That's what I'm shooting for. All right. Like this. Get away. Make it a lot easier. We're getting on that. Wait, punch. Those marks on the work. No, I'm always putting it out the way because I don't remember how to this out of it. That way it'll be easy. Whatever looks like down here. Alright, I'll be working there. We'll get done. And if we get a hold of it, fill up. A little bit. I'll probably got. Or a little bit of green. Pull out of it. Clean out a little bit. Let you know. There's a little bit of stuff in there. Let's do that. That way. Better. I'll bring that. Alright, let's go. Get a little more. It's all wrong. Park. I can run on. Reduce a little weight. Slide that front shaft off. This has to slide in there. Alright, let's get that started. Get this moved around here. 2 through right there. Put a couple nuts on them to hold them. Now, I did have a little bit of problem with that housing. I think I talked about it in the video where that bearing had gone out in the front. that spot in there where bearing rode, it kind of wore it out. I filed it down, ground it down, worked on it the best I could, and they're a little bit, the gears were a little bit tight going back together. Now, that could be a difference in pressure, that I've got the gears in a different spot than they have been before, or it could be, you know, just a little extra pressure from that housing being out of whack just a little bit. So we're going to run it a little bit. Once we get it all back together, I want to get it warmed up good, and I want to run it some and then drain that oil. I should have got everything out of it, so if any metal comes out, that tells me that I've got a little bit of problem. I'll check it for heat, see how much heat we've got rolling into it. All in all, it's kind of gone back together a little easier than I thought it would. I say that, and that's when everything will break after I start running or something. Main thing is, do not forget to put my oil back in after I torque those down. I'm gonna hang on a bit. I'm gonna check my torque, see what my spec is. We'll get our oil in it, and then we'll get our bolts in for our shield and get that back on there and put our PTO shaft on the front, and we should be ready to roll this one out the door. I will have to put our hoses back on after I check the torque, but we should be ready to roll it out the door. And I don't know, before I take it to the field with hay in it, I'll probably just run it out here, let it run for 20-30 minutes and try to heat it up and just see what I got. But good thing is I've got a backup baler out in the shed that I finished up with last year, and so that's what I'll use if this one does have issues. So I think I told you, I don't know, I remember what the exact number was. It was like $180 in bearings and races and stuff in that. He used one locally with $750, so, and you don't know what you're getting with that either. You'd almost have to split it and double check and make sure everything's good on it. But we're gonna run this one and see what we can do. So let me check in the book, see what my spec is, and then we'll get it tidied up. So there's actually no spec on these bolts here. But on this split housing aluminum, it was 15 to 20 foot-pounds on the bolts that hold it together. If you're interested, it holds 1.4 pints of 85 140 GL5 gear oil. And then all you were doing to go from 540 to 1000 is this shaft that goes this way. It just needs to switch and go over here, and that shaft over here. So one's a 17 tooth and one's a 23 tooth gear, and all you're doing is switching those gears. Actually, you're probably not switching the shaft, you're switching the gear on the shaft, excuse me. But that's actually pretty simple to make that a 1000 RPM baler, which could come in handy if you've got, you know, like I've got a 1270, it's just a 1000 RPM shaft. If you got like a 4640, 4630 John Deere, they're just 1000 RPM shaft. 2390 case or something like that, that's a 1000 RPM shaft only. They don't have a flip shaft. That would come in handy if you bought one of these balers and just change those gears. That's pretty simple. 530 would be the same, 535. So keep that in mind if you got a 530 baler that's 540 shaft. Now you will have to change the yoke on the end to match the 1000 splined RPM. I mean, you could run an adapter on it down to the 540, but you're putting a whole lot more stress when you run an adapter. But anyway, so I'm gonna just put my ratchet on these, tighten them down just a little bit, put my hoses back on, and we'll have this one wrapped up. So I'm pretty much gonna call that a done deal with this video. You don't need to worry about me putting the last few things on. So thanks for watching, and check out some of my other videos. We're working on a 1460 disc bind We working on a 6950 Kubota, rebuilding the engine. Did some kingpins in a 5220 Case IH front wheel assist axle. Put a power beyond on a David Brown 995. There's lots of other little things that we're doing in the shop here. So check them out. Thank you. Well, you know what? I stand corrected. I was reading a little further in there, and the gear haste mounting cap screws is at the very beginning. They torque to 60 foot-pounds. Also, there is a rolling torque on the, well, no, that's on the Comer. So if you're doing a Comer, it's got a rolling torque. They don't have a rolling torque spec for the split housing, but 60 foot-pounds on those cap screws. So appreciate you watching. Check out my other videos, and we'll get this one finished up now. Thank you.